From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. Justin Spears here with a lot of people today. Usually it's only like 3 people, but we got the entire Arizona Daily Star sports staff. Bruce Pascoe is on the way, but I'm here with sports editor, the Star, Ryan Finley.
What's going on?
Michael Lev, PJ Brown, and like I said, Bruce Pascoe will be joining us. Oh, we're also without Greg Hansen.
Yes.
I forget. About our longtime Arizona Daily Star sports columnist. And I love this podcast because we're going to take a look back on what happened in 2022 in the year of sports with the Arizona Wildcats. Plus, we're also going to look ahead to 2023. And I have a mailbag.
Perfect.
And some questions submitted about 2022 and also about this upcoming year. So
great.
We got lots to discuss over the next 30 plus minutes to an hour. Okay. So I just want to do kind of like a round table discussion with all of you guys, because now that we're putting a bow on 2022, a lot of things have happened, and I have all the different beat reporters. I have the guy who oversaw everything this past year. Lev, I'll start with you. Year 2 of the Jedd Fisch era. I would consider it a success, even though the Wildcats didn't make it to a bowl game. 5-7. And you beat ASU for the first time since 2016, I thought sets them up well for 2023. But when you think about the entire year for the U of A football program, what stands out to you?
Yeah, it was a great stepping stone year for the program. I don't think anyone expected them to make a bowl game. It became a realistic possibility to a degree after they upset UCLA. And they were 4-6 at that point, and they had 2 home games to go against Washington State and Arizona State. So it was possible, but their over-under on wins was 2.5 or 3. They exceeded that by a wide margin. As you mentioned, they beat their rival for the first time, ending a 5-game losing streak in the series, which is a very big deal. They had a really good recruiting year, top 25 class. The year started, 2021 ended with them getting Tetero and McMillan. It began, this year began with them getting Jaden DeLaura out of the transfer portal. Those are significant acquisition. Jacob Cowing was another one. Hunter Eccles. They really did a good job of reshaping the roster, and they had a good year. And I don't see how you couldn't feel hopeful and optimistic about the direction of the football program based on what happened in the calendar year of 2022.
Ryan, as a former football beat writer, what's your perspective on U of A football this past year?
I think Jedd Fisch is building it, quote unquote, the right way, which is with recruiting and development. Obviously the transfer portal has really helped. It reminds me so much of what Mike Stoops did when he first got here. And, people forget that build took 3 or 4 years. I mean, they were 3-8, 6-5, something like that in his first 3 years. To do it right, if you want to do it right, it's going to take a while. And I think that Jedd Fisch, Lev, you'd probably agree with me, is ahead of schedule, maybe a year or more ahead of schedule at this point. And things continue to look good. But what I liked about this year's team, it wasn't just that they were competent, it was that they were exciting. Offensively, it's one of the best offenses Arizona's ever put together as a program. Made big noise in the Pac-12. And, if they can make the same strides next year, but on defense, you're looking at a bowl team.
It was strategic, Jedd said, to build up the offense, create some excitement, kind of generate interest not only among fans, but potential Wildcats, to play for that team. This idea that they're doing it the right way, I think, is really interesting in today's world, where you can, if you're the right guy in the right situation, you can engineer a quick fix. I mean, Colorado,
Deion Sanders.
Since they hired Deion Sanders, they have soared up the recruiting rankings. I mean, they have a top 10 portal class that they're bringing in. They're going to have, probably end up with 40 new players. ASU's kind of doing the same thing, although not as, the caliber of players they're bringing in isn't as high profile. When I look at, this Arizona build, as Jedd always calls it, like I look at 2024 as kind of the year when, they could really make a huge jump because all of those impressive freshmen from 2022 will be juniors. In theory, they'll also be Arizona Wildcats. But there's no guarantee that will be the case.
Yeah.
Tetero and McMillan could totally blow up as a sophomore, and then all of a sudden he decides to go in the portal because some other big-name school is offering him some crazy NIL deal that Arizona can't compete with.
Right. He could follow 6 of his former teammates to USC.
He could, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
He might be a different kind of cat and isn't, no pun intended, isn't someone who'd be tempted by that. But that is the world that you live in, and you kind of have to re-recruit your own roster annually to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, I'll never forget after the USC game, I was talking with my radio cohort, Ali Farhang, and he made the joke, after Dorian Singer's highlight catches and the performance against USC, watch him enter the transfer portal and go to USC.
It's just what
and
he
sure
did.
enough, look what he did. But now you have a lot of college coaches kind of shaking their fists like there's tampering going on in college football. Like, do you think, wow, like that hasn't been happening for several years.
Apparently that just started in 2022.
And as if that's going to stop anybody from going after a player. This world has existed in basketball for a while now. Bruce, I wonder how has it changed roster building, personnel management, etc., would you say, over the last, 5-10 years? I mean, it seems like you're changing your roster over every year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been this is the transfer portal and the NIL has just accelerated everything, and it's been happening for probably the last 20 years. Every year it gets a little more, and I think at least locally here, we saw in the Miller era there he literally was turning over the roster half of the roster every single season for many years in a row. And so this has just gotten a little bit worse. The interesting thing now, at least with this program, is that Tommy Lloyd now, because he was recruiting a lot of international players, those players are more likely to stick around. So it's a little bit different. I mean, that's one way to maybe buck the trend a little bit. But to your point earlier, Michael, if somebody wanted to throw a big NIL package at any of these guys, that could happen at any year to this program too. You never know who's going to come back until probably about July 1st every year. This is the way it's looking.
Bruce, what seems to me to be different in basketball is used to be guys would leave because they weren't playing. Yeah. And now you're seeing guys leaving because they're playing and succeeding and just going to other schools. Right? Maybe not at Arizona, but other places.
That's almost certainly NIL in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Right.
You just don't know exactly what that player's getting or whatever. But yeah, no, it was either an up transfer or a down transfer for a player who wasn't playing, or an up transfer for a mid-major guy who wanted to play on a higher level, and those are still happening. Mm-hmm. But now you're seeing guys who are in a good position that are going to another place for a good position, and what's behind that? That's different.
Right. Right. It's that somebody said this much smarter than me. It's the answer to all of your questions is money. Right? I mean, if you wonder why somebody's doing something, it's probably because there's more money somewhere else.
Yeah, and then the unspoken thing is you don't know how that's affecting chemistry too. I mean, the football thing, when you saw those two guys got the cars, and then a few days later they lost another key player. Is that kind of thing? Is NIL behind that, or are we going to see more of that, or whatever? It's just a whole different ballgame.
Since Bruce is here now and PJ is sitting beside me, let's talk about some basketball. 2022 was obviously interesting for both programs. It was the first year under head coach Tommy Lloyd. I believe it was Adia Barnes' sixth year. Obviously, it wasn't as good as the year prior. Little disappointing finish in the tournament, but the coaching staff was still able to put together an impressive recruiting class. They have a very talented team now. They added ASU transfer Jade LaVille, and since it's rivalry week, obviously Arizona ASU playing, it's a big week. So when you think about 2022 and everything that happened, what stands out to you?
So I kind of buck the trend here. I think it was this is a really exciting time for the Arizona women's basketball program. It's post Aari McDonald, which was so exciting. Let's face it, Aari McDonald, arguably the best player in U of A women's basketball history. And that changes everything. So last year was sort of that in-between year, and it's still a little bit in between as Adia Barnes starts to get the right pieces. And what really is exciting is how she's building this team now. The fact that she brought in a highly rated recruiting class for this year and followed it up with another one, which probably is number 3. I think both of them were in the top 10 in rankings. And to see now how she's going to develop these players, these freshmen, so that she's already said, and then the freshmen have already said, just wait, because when we're juniors and we're really understanding this program, this system, and we all come together, it's going to be something big. And I think that this is just the beginning of the future for this program, and that's why it's so exciting right now to watch this.
PJ, the most interesting thing that Adia Barnes said, I thought, in the year 2022 was that there was probably an easier way to win games this year, that she could have gone and gotten even more transfers. I mean, yes, she got Lauren Fields and Jade Laville, and those are 2 rotation players. But she said that she could have went and gotten more transfer portal people, but she was afraid of chasing off the freshmen. And to me, that's sort of this new dynamic in the age of NIL and of instant gratification. Is that going against the trend a little bit, do you think? Letting these freshmen sort of learn on the job as opposed to just bringing in a transfer who can start right away?
Well, I think most people would say yes, but in some instances, you're seeing some of the freshmen come right in and play.
Right.
Kiki Rice at UCLA is most likely the freshman of the year.
Right. She was an Arizona target. They thought
Yeah.
they were in on her, right?
Absolutely. It came down to UCLA and Arizona at the end. But other schools, you see a few of the other ones relying on their freshmen, and some of it's because they're that good, because this freshman class was one of the highest rated classes in recent history.
Sure.
And
best class they had ever had as a program, right?
Right, but also in the nation.
Right.
2023 was a top class, or 2022, I should say. 23 is good too, but 2022 nationally is. But then there are other programs, like you look at an Oregon State who lost a lot of players, and they have to start their freshmen and play their freshmen because they've got basically nobody else. They have a couple of upperclassmen, but that's it. But I do think now Adia is, she was the first one to really step into the transfer portal, one of the first. She was one of the first to really rely on international players for a while there. And now she's got the freshmen, and she wants to keep them because she sees that this freshman class, next freshman class, those if she can keep the majority of these players, if they stay, they can continually go to the Final Four year after year.
But that's the challenge for them because it seems like they lost 7 players last offseason. And I mean, it seems like more and more players are leaving if they're not playing.
Absolutely.
So the challenge is to get freshmen who are good enough to play right away, right?
Yeah, and that's the difference with this class. This class is really special. Maya Naji is going to be, she's the highest rated freshman that's come in. You have Kaylin Gilbert, who's one of the future probably point guards. And you have Paris Clark and Lamaya Hilton, who will grow into their roles. But then you follow that up with Montea Dew and the combo of Brea Cunningham and Jada Williams. And that's, look at that right there. You have a great foundation to build on. And that's what's so exciting is all of a sudden Adia's starting to get the top freshmen. And this all comes from the run that she took with Ari McDonald and company to the title game. This is all a result of that, plus the years of Adia knocking on the door and talking to them. But now they're opening the door more because they've seen Adia, they've seen how she coaches and how she lets her players play and have freedom, and they want to come here. The other thing that I think is really going to help is Jada Williams, who is the star of NIL in high school. She gets
a lot of followers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She has the most deals, and for someone like her, not only her skill set and what a great teammate she is, But from just the NIL aspect, for her to come to Arizona, other high school kids must be looking at that and saying, wow, if Jada Williams can go to Arizona, I can go there and I can get NIL deals.
Yeah. Also, I mean, Jada already has how many thousands of Instagram followers and Twitter followers. So she's like, I already have this platform. I don't need to go to a USC or UCLA or a big market school to build me up. I'm already built. Now I'm helping out Arizona. If anything, I'm bringing more attention to the Arizona women's basketball program. So that was a big get for Adia Barnes. But we'll talk about 2023 and what that team is going to look like here in this upcoming year. But Bruce, Arizona, after the 2021 season, hired this assistant coach from Gonzaga and Tommy Lloyd, and a lot of people were, I guess, skeptical or just wondering what it would look like under the new regime. And you had a lot of question marks. How will Ben Mathurin look in year 2? How will Dalen Terry and all these other guys look in year 2? And lo and behold, Arizona went from being an unranked team, a complete mystery, to one of the top teams in college basketball. They got a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And everyone is all in on Tommy Lloyd. The up-tempo basketball, the I guess, finesse style of basketball that you see in the NBA. It's a good brand, and it's Arizona has their guy, to say the least. But what do you make of just Tommy Lloyd and what you saw out of year 1?
Well, I mean, I would think it's kind of hard to define basketball by the calendar year because the New Year's Eve is basically July 1st, the way I look at it. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about with Tommy Lloyd, this happened in 2021. They were unranked in 21. They became ranked in 21. They were starting to show who they could be. But, but anyway, year 1, basically 21, 22, obviously it was a pleasant surprise for U of A. All good vibes for a program that frankly needed it after years and years of investigations. But I think, the only upside is they built it up so fast, so quick last season that there was a little bit of a disappointment in 22, which is what we're kind of talking about. And that they almost lost in the second round to TCU, and then they got bounced by Houston in the Sweet 16. And they had created expectations to go much further than that, but ultimately didn't. And I remember reading Ken Palm had an interesting stat entering the tournament saying that no team that's ever been unranked in the preseason that became a number 1 seed has ever made the Final Four. And that's exactly what happened to U of A. It's almost like you either are reverting to what you were expected to be, or, and I think this is more the case of U of A, you built up your expectations. All of a sudden, you have pressure. You're in a different situation, and it's hard to perform on that. So, and then they obviously ran into some tough matchups. So, but all things considered, to your point, Justin, it was a big change, big surprise, a lot of good feelings, everything they needed basically. And then later in 22, just a few weeks ago, we saw the IRP finished up the case, put that behind them with very minimal penalties, and frankly, all is good for U of A basketball right now.
How do you feel about just 5 years later that whole situation with
Are you ready to never write about this ever again?
Well, I just did about an hour ago, which is why I was a little late getting here. But no, it never goes away. I mean, I remember when that day came down in 2017 in September. I remember thinking, this is going to go on for years, and it's going to be a fabric of everything we write about, and it was, and more, because it went into not 1 but 2 federal cases. It went into a movie on HBO. It turned into an NCAA case. It turned into a re-NCAA case when they went to the IRP, and just on and on and on. And I think all of us in here could probably recite some of the allegations off the top of our head, and this and that. So, but at the end of the day, it's interesting because I think while this process was going on, we had massive changes. We had NIL coming up. We had a lot of things where, granted, the allegations against Arizona really wouldn't have been any different with the current rules, but still, there was sort of a general loosening of things. And then you had the IRP taking over, where they set the precedent like, okay, we're not going to penalize current players. That's just not what we're going to do. So once that came out, it was apparent that Arizona was probably going to be okay with the one year of self-sanctioning that they did. And so there was sort of that. Whereas at the beginning of this, we all thought, oh my God, this, Book's going to jail. We're seeing this might be a multiple year postseason ban. And even as late as 2018, 2019, I would have thought they would have got another year or two because they were looking at a level 1 aggravated case, but that was downgraded significantly by the IRP and, frankly, whatever Arizona did to, and the facts that were sorted out. So, ultimately it came down to being much less than I think we thought. But that said, you could argue that even though the penalties were light, you could argue that this program's been through several years of bad publicity. They had coaches fired, coaches jailed. Sean Miller, continued to coach, but his reputation took a hit. There was a lot of sort of ancillary things or whatever you could say. So it all was still ended up being a lot.
I want to know what Bruce and the Pascos do on June 30th every year to celebrate their version of New Year's Eve. What do you got?
Yeah, it's just relaxing, actually. You're just wrapping up that last NBA draft follow-up and planning a vacation, frankly. A lot of times I do take vacation those first couple weeks in July because it's like, okay, the roster's settled, the NBA draft is over, let's go.
Yeah, 4th of July, you cannot find Bruce anywhere.
Nope.
He gets off the grid.
He's off the grid. Do you still go places where there's no cell phone service? Because that's the smartest thing anybody's ever done.
No, it's gotten too hard to do that.
No.
But you've been great, Ryan. I mean, seriously, you guys have been great. When I go, when those 2 weeks or 3 weeks come around, you guys have been great. I've been backing up and just let me forget about everything for a little bit.
Does anything sound better than spending 2 weeks somewhere without your cell phone? Or is this just a 40-year-old guy talking here?
No, I don't even know where you can do that anymore.
I know.
My brother, when he went to Europe, he left his phone and his laptop back home and just went to Europe. Was like, I'm going to be present everywhere I'm at.
Wow.
And then he came back to obviously a mass load of emails and text messages.
Yeah.
But he said, always do that.
Sounds nice.
All right, guys. Well, let's look ahead to our mailbag here. We got some questions submitted. Thanks for those who always do that. We did that during the football season. We'll definitely do that during the basketball season. Our first question is from AZ Cat John. And AZ Cat John asks, capital improvements timeline to Arizona Stadium and High Corbett to improve the comfortability for fans who attend games. This sounds like a Michael Lev question.
Yeah, okay.
Michael?
I know that they've been doing work at High Corbett underneath, I guess would be the third base stands, right?
Yeah, home clubhouse.
Clubhouse, yeah. So they've done extensive work underneath there. I've seen some drawings. I think there is a phase 2 or phase 3 to this thing where they're going to make some improvements that would impact fans. It'd be awesome if they could, do some sort of shades. But I just don't know if that's physically possible or technically possible, just given how the stadium is designed. But I do know that something's in the works. The football project seemed to have a lot of momentum. There were pretty specific discussions, and then the pandemic hit. They lost, all this revenue, right? I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but it was a lot. And those plans just got totally derailed. So I feel like we're kind of in a holding pattern on that one. I haven't heard a lot about it, but it's definitely worth bringing up. I think the next time any of us, bump into Dave Hickey to see what's going on with that, because it's needed.
West Side
for sure
is in dire need of renovation.
Well, and it's weird though. Remember, just because they're breaking ground on improvements doesn't mean that these improvements will get made in a timely manner. Yeah. Anybody who's watched a football game at San Jose or at Hawaii in the last 3 or 4 years,
Oregon State also,
or Oregon State knows this stuff takes years. I mean, multiple seasons worth of construction, and so Arizona has to ask itself: does it want to try to put hundreds of millions of dollars into refurbishing the stadium and also cut its capacity in half until that renovation's done?
Especially at a point where
they might be winning.
And you're going to be winning maybe 8 or 9 games.
I mean, you could make the argument that the time to do the construction was starting in about March of 2020, right? You could have been like, hey, see you in 2023. And then all of a sudden the team would be good and the stadium would be nice. But
no one was allowed. No one was allowed in the stadium in 2020 anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So interesting.
So what's half of empty?
Are they going to play?
You can't divide by 0, right?
Right. Are they going to play in Carson? Is that what's going to happen?
Carson, California.
Yeah. Well, the stadium gets
Chargers.
Yes, it is.
We'll talk about the Chargers in a little bit.
Different podcast.
All right. This is a Bruce Pascoe question from Chris Halligan. how likely is it that Henry Vasar plays another year in Tucson? I'm willing to bet he might play another 2 years. I think he's a multi-year guy. I mean, he was dubbed as the best European prospect from this past recruiting cycle, and a lot of people, including myself, had expectations that he was going to be kind of like, I wouldn't say the same type of player as Lauri Markkanen, but maybe the same impact. Because Lauri was kind of this big question mark and surprised a lot of people. You had a lot of draft experts calling Henry Vasar, oh, he's the number one European prospect, so a lot of people had crazy expectations for him. He hasn't lived up to them, but I still think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I think it's probably another year. It's always, you're always, I always hesitate to say that because you just never know. But I think even by now, you know, when Lauri Markkanen was a freshman, you knew it was like, okay, he might be gone. It looks really like he's really a lot better than everybody thought. That's not been quite the case with Vasar. They're a little bit different players. And, you know, Markkanen was so unusual in the way he could play both inside and out at that size almost right away. It was just astounding. And the other thing is, too, I think in that 16-17 year, they needed him to do a lot more, whereas Vasar's playing at a time when Umar Mbalo and Azuolas Tubelis might be two of the three best players in the Pac-12 right now. I mean, it's so they don't need him to throw him in the fire as much as they have. There's, you know, that in that sense too. And I think so. I think Tommy Lloyd's philosophy is he wants to develop these guys and not put pressure on them. So I think this is a good situation for Tommy in that he can just bring a guy like Vasar along and use him. You know, maybe not as much as Sean Miller probably had to use Markkanen in 16-17. So. But that said, yeah, I think maybe 3 years tops to your point. But it's interesting because a player like that too has so many options. Because, you know, does he want to stick around and develop so he can get in the NBA, which I'm sure is his first goal. But sometimes these guys, after 2 or 3 years, if they don't look like that, they'll go anyway because with a European passport, they can always go home and, you know, make pretty good money somewhere there. So that said, he could leave at any time. But I would guess that it's probably at least another year.
All right, back to Lev. This is a twofer on football questions. AZ Wildcats asks, who else is Arizona football looking at in the portal and for recruiting for the 2023 class? When will Jonathan Flo commit? The brother of Justin Flo, who is a safety transfer from Oregon as well. And then another question from the dude, 1121, is Arizona a bowl team next season?
Okay, regarding the portal, I mean, it's been pretty quiet for Arizona. I don't think that they're going to bring in a bunch more guys through the portal. I really don't. They have 4 currently. I think it's going to remain in single digits. I really think Jed Fish has got a long-term outlook on this thing. He really believes in high school recruiting. That being said, there is going to be another surge. January 4th through the 8th is a visitation period for transfers. We're in a dead period currently. So there's probably going to be another wave. And, you know, at that point you start running into, hey, you know, if you want to transfer here, you got to get enrolled soon in order to, you know, get in classes in time for the next semester to begin, which happens in January.
Yeah, soon. Yeah.
I had heard with Jonathan Flo, who's the brother of Justin Flo, that there were maybe some academic concerns there. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I mean, Justin Flo has signed, so he's in, and that'll be a really fascinating one to watch. Are they a bowl team next year? I think there's definitely a good possibility. However, the Pac-12, it might be loaded next year.
Yeah.
You got the returning Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, coming back. Michael Penix is coming back. Bo Nix is coming back.
DJU, baby.
DJU. I mean, I was really kind of underwhelmed by his play this year, but I think that's a perfect fit for him to get away from the spotlight. Really good quarterback coach. The infrastructure is in place at Oregon State. And Colorado's going to be vastly improved too. In Utah, we don't know what Cam Rising's going to do yet, but they're kind of always good. So you're talking about a loaded conference next year. I don't know if next year's the year. Like I said, I think 24 might be the year. USC and UCLA, they go away. So maybe the competition's a little bit less overall, fewer teams to hop over. And a lot of the freshmen from 22, they'll be juniors, like I said, in 24.
What's the non-conference schedule next year?
UTEP.
UTEP is on there and
Here?
NAU. Is that right?
NAU, Mississippi State.
So UTEP and NAU here
Yes.
at Mississippi State.
At Starkville.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 2-1.
So they're going to go 2-1. I think they have a favorable home schedule. They play UCLA at home. They play
all the teams.
They play Utah at home.
Right.
Yeah, I saw somewhere they like Shedeur Sanders, Dion's kid, apparently is a Heisman favorite according to Fox Sports. I'm like,
Let's see him play against Power 5 defenses
that's,
first.
Is he even a top 5 quarterback in the Pac-12?
I mean, Jaden
don't
Delora,
think so.
we think is really good. I'm not sure Jaden Delora is a top 5 quarterback in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Which doesn't say it. Which speaks to how much quarterback talent there is in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Right now, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I had a question about this because we were talking about NIL earlier. To your point, Michael, how much of this guys coming back do you think is related to NILs and collectives keeping these guys around? Because we're seeing that a little bit in men's basketball, but I didn't know in football it sounds like maybe just as well. I mean, especially if you're a borderline NFL prospect.
Right.
I think
yeah.
it's a huge factor, especially with these quarterbacks who are kind of, late round picks.
Bo Nix, for
Nix,
instance.
I'm positive that Bo Nix is going to get more money from Nike, Phil Knight, or whoever is providing that than he would have gotten had he gone into the draft this year. Like maybe you're a 5th or 6th round pick, maybe you make a team, maybe you don't, versus having some sort of guarantee in the upper 6 digits. I don't know if that's going to happen that much in basketball because there's only 2 rounds in the draft. You're kind of in or out. But I think there's guys in football, day 3 projected picks who are like, you know what, I'm better off staying in school for another year. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I think that maybe guys like Keon Bars and Christian Roland Wallace, they might have had that discussion. Like we're day 3 picks in the draft. It might be better for us and our families to go somewhere where we can get, I don't know, I'm just throwing figures out here, $250,000 guaranteed to play this one season before going pro, where nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah, and you get the perks of playing at USC. Yeah. All right, let's move on to this upcoming year, 2023. Happy New Year to all of you guys. When you think about the upcoming year, you have year 2 under Tommy Lloyd. I think that this could maybe be a step back year for the Wildcats. I mean, after having such a great year last year, it's weird saying it's a step back year and they're still a top 5 team. But we don't know what the bench is going to look like. Kylan Boswell, Henry Vasar, all of those guys, how much are those guys going to develop over the next couple of months is something I'm paying attention to. Obviously this year with Jay LaVille being the big addition for the Arizona Wildcats, what do they do in 2023? And then Lev with Chip Hale in year 2, and you have softball in year 2 under Caitlin Lowe. There's a lot of things to look forward to. But out of all the things that we have in place, what's the one thing you're looking forward to most in 2023?
That is a good question. Bruce, do you think that this Arizona team, they're ranked in the top 5 nationally right now, for whatever it's worth, AP rankings? I mean, do you think this is a team that can go further than last year's team did?
Well, I will qualify this by saying I've usually been wrong about them since they hired Tommy Lloyd. I picked them to finish 6th, I think, last year, and they won it. So, and I picked them 3rd this year, and they're looking like they're either going to be 1 or 2 the way they've been playing. But so, no, I don't think so. But, I think 5 is a really high ranking. That would translate, if you were just going by that, you'd say they're going to be a number 2 seed maybe or something. And that would be a really high-end thing. I don't know. I saw them at the beginning of the year and kind of now as a team that's going to get in the tournament and probably win a game or 2, and I still kind of think that'll be the case. But to Justin's point earlier, if the bench develops, this team has a lot more upside because the starters and particularly the front court guys have both improved a lot, and they're that can really take the team. But if the bench doesn't develop, especially a guy like Vasar, you could see a case where somebody's going to get hurt and or they're going to have foul trouble and they're going to get bounced either in the Pac-12 down the stretch of the Pac-12 or in the postseason. So, they need a little more depth, no question, to go further than I would expect anyway.
Arizona has the best front court in college basketball. Yeah. They do, but they don't have any depth. And I
They
thought,
have no scorers off the bench.
Yes, and I thought it was very telling how concerned Tommy Lloyd is with this team when we were talking about the bench and rotating guys, and he said, that I played the starters most of the minutes because I felt like we would be at a disadvantage if I played our bench guys. And I'm like, and he credited Montana State. They're the defending Big Sky champions. They made it to the tournament last year. Right. They're a good team, but you're Arizona. Yeah. You're a top 5 team in the country. When you're playing Montana State, you should never, ever, ever feel like you're at a disadvantage by playing your bench.
Yeah,
and hearing that, I was like, whoa, there might be some problems with this team.
Yeah, that was definitely a little bit of a red flag. And then 2 days later, they played Morgan State, a team that wasn't as good as Montana State, and they still were not dominating this game. But this time he went with the subs, and I asked him about after, and he said, at some point you got to go for it. He knew that this was his last chance to play these guys because boom, Pac-12 play is coming up now, and there's not going to be a whole lot of letting up, and he needs to get what he can out of them, and yeah, it's a question mark for sure.
Same question for PJ. Can this women's basketball team go farther and deeper into the tournament than last year's team did?
Well, they played in the second round last year, so I would think that they would go to the Sweet 16, possibly the Elite 8, if they keep playing the way they did. I mean, when we watched that game against Baylor, I saw that team. I watch a ton of women's basketball. They could have beat almost every team in the country. So they're ranked 18 now, and they could have probably beat everyone from, on that night, anyone from about 5 to 17 they could have beaten. If they play like that and get better, because that's typically what Adia Barnes' teams do. She tries to have them peak at the end of the season, right? So you can play in that, go far in the NCAAs. If they do that, no problem. They could they'll make for sure the Sweet 16 or Elite 8. But if they don't continue to come together like that, then they definitely will make the tournament, but they'll probably finish in the second round again.
But the next 2 weeks are huge. I mean, ASU, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State. My guess is we will know so much more about this team in the next 5 games than we know right now.
Absolutely. This is the gauntlet right now. And it's crazy that they're starting out like this, but the Pac-12 is really, really deep this year. I mean, we always say that the Pac-12 is a tough...
Utah's good.
I mean, Utah is good. Undefeated right now. Yeah. I mean, they're great. There are these teams... So there aren't the teams, again, where you're going to say, oh, that's an easy win, because every night it's going to be tough. So, people actually picked... I think they were picked 4th or something. And in some power rankings, they're 5th right now, Arizona, which seems crazy. But then when you look at, UCLA is healthy, so they're good. And we knew it was a matter of time for them to get healthy. Now, Utah, out of nowhere, not really out of nowhere, they're coached very well. They added some really good players. But, Pac-12 is just so hard that it's really going to be a tough season to see what they do. But I do think that they have the talent on this team to do really well if they can just keep on the same path that they're going and keep listening to their coach. And those are like the 2 things. If they can do that, I've asked assistant coaches, I've asked Adia Barnes, I asked Jade Lavelle this week. I said, what was it that Adia Barnes is telling you for weeks that you have all these flaws, right? That you have to do these certain things. Then you play Kansas and you get blown out. And then the next games, you come together and play like a completely different team. Yeah. What happened? And everybody just says all of a sudden because it was such a glaring loss or something that they bought into what Adia was telling them, right? All of a sudden it became real because they were playing teams that they were blowing out anyway, even if they weren't playing that well. So all of a sudden this became real, and then they just came together. If they continue to do this, they'll go far.
The thing that I'm looking forward to the most in 2023, Justin, I think, is seeing how all of these teams that we've just talked about develop and grow sort of in the absence of drama. Now, you can play this a year from now. You can play this back and make me sound stupid, but think about it. The NCAA or the IARP has ruled, and Arizona's men's basketball program is fine from a postseason standpoint. Dave Hickey's under contract with a new extension. Tommy Lloyd has a new extension. Jed Fish a month ago signed a new extension. Adia Barnes is making $1 million a year under an extension that's a year old. Chip Hale is under contract and brand new. Caitlin Lowe under contract and brand new. I mean, what is going to be the next big question when it comes to Arizona sports? Dave Rubio has said that he plans to retire in the not so distant, not in the fall, but as he's talked about this being sort of his final contract.
Yeah.
They have every relevant person in that department under contract. They have no pending NCAA issues. Sort of, am I jinxing it? Lev, you're shaking your head.
You're putting this out into the ether, Ryan. What are you doing to us?
But think about it though. This could be the longest period of stability that I could remember within that athletic department.
Well, think about the last few years with the investigations, the notice of allegations from the NCAA and all the coaching hires. What was it? Six or seven different coaching changes
in the year 2020. In 2020/21, they fired Sumlin, Miller, Jay Johnson left, Mike Candrea retired. Who else am I missing? I mean, there's more.
Yeah,
you
got a new cross country coach,
soccer
coach.
You're right.
Now they added triathlon.
Right.
I mean,
if I'm Dave Hickey, I'm just kind of like, thank God we've arrived at this point, because there's been so much instability.
We got through it.
Yeah.
Before this, which I don't know, maybe that's par for the course for big time college athletic programs, but it seemed a little excessive there for a while. I mean, it was like, whether it was the NCAA issues with basketball, there were other controversies, off-field stuff, coaching changes. I mean, it was a lot. Yeah. Plus the pandemic thrown into the mix.
Yeah, and Dave Hickey took the job, 4 or 5 months before the federal investigation broke, and it's been all hell has broken loose basically since then. So if I'm
how many times in the last 5 years do you think he wished he was back in Kalamazoo, Michigan?
Small potatoes in Central Michigan.
If I'm Dave Hickey, I'm probably having a pretty good holiday season. Because for the first time ever since he's been in Arizona. But I think that's a good point, Ryan. I think it could be really a period of stability. I think actually, what I'm thinking is it's all the external stuff and how they react to that, like especially with regards to the Pac-12 and media rights. Are they going to stick together? Are they going to branch off? What's going to happen to the conference? And then NIL. How does Arizona respond? Because it doesn't appear, as far as we know, that the collectives here are as strong as they are at certainly some SEC schools and certainly
or Oregon,
LA schools or
LA.
Oregon. Yeah. And how is that going to affect football and both basketball programs down the road? Yeah, especially.
One thing I'm looking forward to most is conference realignment. USC and UCLA bolting after this upcoming year. What do? Do they stick with 10? Do they add Gonzaga as a basketball-only school? San Diego State, Boise State. I was really hoping, and we talked about this, I believe, on our last podcast, that UNLV finds a way to hire Deion Sanders, and UNLV then goes to the Pac-12, and you add a Vegas market.
Oh, Bruce would have loved that. Bruce would love UNLV in the Pac-12. Anyway.
But yeah, those things, conference realignment, is something I'm looking forward to most.
I think by far the biggest story of the year 2022 was that USC and UCLA are leaving the conference.
Yeah.
It's not exactly an Arizona story, but it is because, those are two longtime rivals. Those are prime recruiting areas. It's just not going to be the same without them. It's going to be really weird when USC and UCLA are playing in the Big Ten. It feels kind of icky.
And George Klyavkov is getting the Dave Hickey treatment right now. Takes the job, and then 100%. All this pandemonium.
Right, and then the interesting thing is that if you talk to a lot of the coaches, they are not going to play SC and UCLA, at least for the near future. They're not doing it. And so that's really interesting, too, because that would seem like it's a great non-conference matchup, but they're out. The other coaches are totally out. And then like the SC and the UCLA coaches are thinking, oh, you're going to play us for non-conference.
Okay, just for posterity, let's go around the room. What does the Pac-12 do in terms of expansion? Just so we're all on the record with our
Is this
opinions.
football only?
This is. What does the Pac-12 do now that SC and UCLA are leaving?
I think Gonzaga goes to the Big 12.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as much as I want them to be a part of the Pac-12, I think they're going to go to the Big 12 somehow.
Okay.
San Diego State, Boise State.
Okay.
Those two.
PJ.
I think that they're going to stand pat for a while, and then they're just going to be Pac-10. And then I think eventually, in a few years, they'll add San Diego State. I don't know if they'll add anybody else. I don't think anybody else is quite at that level.
I just got used to calling them the Pac-12. Now they're going to be the Pac-10 again? That's unfair. Bruce.
I still go back and forth. Yeah, I mean, because I was a kid. It was the Pac-8.
Yeah.
So I grew up going to Stanford games in the Pac-8.
Before they let in those damn Arizona schools. Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and which made my mom happy because she went to U of A. But anyway, no, I think I'm kind of with PJ. I think that this upcoming media rights thing, the ongoing thing is going to have a lot to do with it. If they get a decent deal, they could just stand pat. But I think to me, adding a pair makes the most sense. So I've been saying this since the beginning. I think San Diego State and UNLV make the most sense. I don't know if that's what they'll do, but that just makes sense to me as far as market and geography and travel partners and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I hate to just go with the consensus here, but I think they're going to stick with the Pac-10, at least for a little while, and kind of see how that goes. There's fewer slices of the pie to divide up the money that way, and you still have some pretty good big brands with Oregon and Washington, both doing really well in football, especially down the road. I mean, San Diego State is the most logical candidate because it gets you back into Southern California. We talked about UNLV. That's a big growing TV market, big population there, kind of like Phoenix.
Allegiant Stadium, too.
Allegiant Stadium is there.
Well, don't you think that's where the Pac-12 headquarters are going to be 5 years from now?
I would say
do.
that's logical. I think Gonzaga coming as a basketball only is within the realm of possibilities. And then, if you look at Texas, there's been a lot of chatter about SMU. I've even brought up UTSA.
I think they make more sense
as
than
a
SMU.
Possibility. I mean, that's a big city, and a really good football program right now. If maybe you take 2 from Texas and 2 from the Mountain West, and you become the Pac-14. But I think for now, the most logical play is to go with the Pac-10.
Right. I think the dream scenario is to somehow blast BYU out of the Big 12. I think the dream scenario there would be San Diego State and BYU. BYU becomes Utah's natural rival again, which I think would be good. To me, that makes a ton of sense. I don't think that's going to happen because the money does not exist to do that. If I had to guess, I would say San Diego State and quickly. And then after that, maybe Gonzaga for hoops.
Well, they've always been against. It seems like there's always been a thing against BYU because of the religious aspect and the no Sunday thing.
Sure.
And that I think that's still a thing.
That still exists. Yeah. But I think, if you're going to and this is no knock on San Diego State. My parents went there, got relatives who went there. But I think if you're going to sort of bend the rules a little bit to get a school like San Diego State or Fresno State or UNLV, and maybe BYU looks less bad by comparison.
The biggest brand out there is BYU,
right?
But they're not a free agent. That's the tricky part. You kind of had the opportunity
and didn't
at some point and didn't go.
Well, they could have added BYU and Utah.
BYU determined their future before USC and UCLA left.
Right.
So once those two schools left, it's like, well, what are our options?
Right.
George was kind of stuck, and the options are pretty limited and frankly, relatively speaking, unappealing. Yeah.
I will say this: the Aztecs have a brand new stadium that you've been to.
Should have had the Holiday Bowl there.
Should have, but they have a brand new stadium. It seems like they're peaking at the right time, just like Utah was right before Utah joined. Right.
Yep.
I think everybody sort of thought Utah was kind of a JV team to add to the Pac-12, and as it turns out, they're the ones who've brought all the value.
They're the top.
Colorado's been kind of terrible, with the exception of one Pac-12 tournament championship. They've done nothing since they came to the Pac-12 in any sport that matters.
Yeah. Speaking of San Diego, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Are we allowed to talk about
That's
it?
a different podcast.
Okay.
Let's do one next week.
Okay.
Yes. yes. I'll cry on the air next week. How about that?
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Year in review, 2022. Now we got 2023 ahead. Happy New Year to all of you guys.
Thank you.
Happy New Year to all of our listeners. Thank you all for supporting the Arizona Daily Star. Don't forget to subscribe on Tucson.com. Download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. And make sure to download the Wildcast podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.